Hey everybody, John here from the esports department going over the two-game quarterfinal slate for tomorrow morning. Um, as with most two-game slates, honestly, I don't think there's a ton to go on this slate. I think your advantages are going to be pretty straightforward and obvious to people. Um, there is still an advantage to be had. I mean, I definitely see how the masses would play this slate differently than I want to play this slate. So there's obviously some level of advantage there, but you're just not ever really getting much on these two-game quarterfinal slates. But let's examine what we're dealing with. And the stats that I pulled up here are stats from the World Championship in particular. And let me actually bring up the League of Legends World Championship here so that we can take a look at something that I want to make points about while we're here. So let's bring up the groups, and let's have a look at what's going on. So Damwon Gaming minus 750, DragonX plus 400. That's our first matchup. As most people know, DragonX and Damwon played in the LCK finals. Damwon won 3-0. These teams played twice during the regular season, as they do in the LCK, and they split those matches 1-1. A lot of people say that maybe the DragonX win there was not as legitimate. Maybe felt like maybe there was some throwing involved. But that said, I mean, you're looking at the two best teams in the LCK as far as I'm concerned, and these odds just seem crazy to me for the two best teams in the league. I mean, is there any league where we think this is the case? Top Esports versus JDG, would the odds be this far apart? I mean, that's clearly not. Even in NA, I mean, TL against TSM or TSM against FlyQuest, TL against FlyQuest, would these odds be even close to correct? No. Same in Europe, G2 against Fnatic. I don't think the odds would be anywhere near this far. So it feels a little bit wild to me to think that Damwon is this much better than DRX. So DRX had a 4-2 group stage. Damwon had a 5-1 group stage. Gold per minute 1999 to 1919, not super far apart there. Gold differential per minute plus 367 to plus 256, so pretty sizable advantage for Damwon. First blood and first turret, both teams with a 50% first blood, Damwon with a 100% first turret, and they have a significantly better dragon percentage at 81 to 53. At 15 minutes, Damwon was up 2100, DRX was up about 2900. So, really, I mean, the stats come off kind of even, but I will caution you, and I'm going to do this because it's important for other matchups that we're going to see as well. Let's look at these groups real quick. So DRX was in a group with Top Esports, which is obviously a very tough matchup. But then FlyQuest and Unicorns of Love were two of the most giving teams in the tournament as far as stats and gold-wise. Like, they were giving up very big leads, allowing very lopsided games. So when I see the gold differential at 15 minutes being plus 3,000 for DragonX, a lot of that I think has to do with the fact that FlyQuest and Unicorns of Love were in their group. Damwon up against Talon and Rogue, two teams that I think were better than FlyQuest and Unicorns of Love, but also two teams that are a little bit more on the conservative side, unlikely to give up as big of a gold lead by 15 minutes or gold differential per minute, etc. So I do think that it's a bit of a lie that these stats are as close as they are. I think Damwon's definitely a significantly better team than DragonX. That said, where else are you going to get advantages on a two-game best-of-5 slate, really? I think DragonX is definitely playable in GPPs. There's always upsets like this. I mean, I know some people are coming in, it's their first year watching Worlds and stuff, but there's always an upset like this somewhere. I mean, the one I pointed out at the Gold Card podcast, G2 with Hjarnan, before they made the super team, knocking out Uzi's RNG team in the quarterfinals a couple years ago. That's an example of a matchup that was probably handicapped even heavier than this. I'm guessing that was, if I went back, I probably did a video on it, so I probably have the stats somewhere. But I'm guessing that it was probably something like negative 1,200 or more for RNG in that series, and G2 beat them fairly handily. So, I mean, it can definitely happen. Misfits almost dethroned SKT one year. There's always something like that. So I think if you just go through the last three slates here and just play the favorites every time, I don't think you're setting yourself up for a lot of success. Give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance with some underdog plays if you're going to play the GPPs, obviously. Not excuse me, not talking about cash games. So I think DragonX is live, but obviously Damwon is a pretty big favorite and should be a pretty reasonable favorite. The second match of the day, Sunning against JDG. Sunning 1914 with a plus 233 goal differential per minute. JDG with an 1877 and plus 137 goal differential per minute. First Blood, First Turret 5743 to 5033. Dragon percentages 63 to 53. And at 15 minutes, it was plus 1037 to plus 790. So all edges going to Sunning. Once again, though, I think it's important to point out the groups. So JDG played a much more conservative group that also had Damwon in it, probably the hardest team in the tournament, where Sunning was the best team in their group and played against G2, a team that obviously gives up a lot of points when they lose in general, and they did beat G2 twice, thanks to the tiebreakers as well, because these stats will include the stats from the tiebreaker. Team Liquid and Machi are kind of conservative teams, which is why I think these numbers are not super overblown. Like, I think if Sunning was in this group instead of Top Esports, probably their stats here would be a little bit wilder, because I think they still would have gotten out of the group, but they would have had much bigger gold leads, much bigger differential per minute, etc. So I don't think it's wrong that JDG is the favorite, even though Sunning's stats here at the World Championship are pointed out to be a little bit better. The biggest advantage that I can think of coming out of this game, I do think JDG is the favorite to win. I like JDG quite a bit. In fact, I think this line is a little bit soft. I put a little bit of money on this line. I think JDG wins this series a lot of the time. The real advantages you can get on this slate are kind of twofold, I think. This matchup should be kind of split. The ownership, I think, is pretty clearly going to be Damwon first, JDG, then Sunning, DragonX at the lowest. So there's a couple different ways you can get an advantage. Number one, you can just play DragonX if you want. DragonX obviously isn't going to have a lot of ownership playing against Damwon. I think they'll be pretty disrespected as far as ownership goes. JDG and Sunning, the biggest advantage there, and let's go over to the projections for this. The biggest advantage there is that JDG and Sunning projects to be the higher scoring matchup. And well, so people are going to want to, people almost always want to play heavier stacks of the more sure thing. So people, I think, will want to be on Damwon Gaming as their heavy stack if they can help it, where Sunning and JDG project higher pretty much everywhere. So whichever of those teams you're playing, I think playing them as your heavy stack is the advantage for the slate as far as I'm concerned, especially in smaller field things, especially in things like heads-ups. That said, there is some backfire potential. There probably is a bigger chance that Sunning and JDG goes to extra games and JDG loses a game or two somewhere than there is for Damwon. And in the cases where Damwon wins 3-0 and JDG wins, say, 3-2, there's a pretty reasonable chance that Damwon would outscore them just from the games not played and not having a game where they underscored 20 in the loss. Then again, you're dealing with two LPL teams here. What are the chances that JDG loses a game and outscores 20 points a player? I think it's reasonable. I think there's definitely a shot that that could happen. So I think my advantage for this slate is to be heavier on the JDG Sunning matchup, especially if you're playing smaller fields. I think that's going to lend you some small advantages there. If you're playing cash, let's have a look around, because this is also, you know, when you're on a 2-game slate, it's not just about if you're playing cash, it's also about if you're playing GPPs and you're trying to differentiate. So, why is it not generating? I know these teams can make a lineup together. Okay, so you can play Kanavi captain with 4 JDG. That is its favorite way to make this lineup. It projects at 970.6. Can you do... I'm assuming then that you could do Canyon captain if you wanted, because that's probably where we end up getting the advantage here. Yeah, so Canyon captain is a possibility and actually leaves a decent amount of salary on the table. I'm guessing, though, given that I had to change the max salary cap setup, that you cannot get Yagao captain, I'm guessing. Just double checking the pricing here. Ghost at 11.7, so yeah, Yagao would be the cheapest. I'm guessing we're not going to be able to get Yagao captain no matter what we do. A 200 gap, a 200 gap, a 200 gap, and a 200 gap. So it doesn't matter which other JDG or which other Damwon player we play. Let's say we went like this. 5100, not enough to get Damwon team in there. If we replace... We're not going to be able to do it the other way either. If we put Barrel in here and go for a 3-3, we still can't get JD Gaming team. So it's jungle captains, which is pretty unfortunate. I I hate it when there's really only like 1 or 2 viable captain options. I think Canyon Captain and Kanavi Captain are just going to have to be hugely owned because of that. It's really the best way to build the lineups. You can try out the top lane captains. I think I'll definitely have some of those in the bigger GPPs. There's definitely ways to do things like that to try to get some advantage. But there's just really, it's not an exciting slate as far as trying to take advantage of stuff. Personally, I think in cash I like the Kanavi Captain. I think JDG, personally, I think they're just as likely to sweep as Damwon is. And for that reason, I'd rather have the higher scoring matchup, which is JDG. But this is not a mega exciting slate. Your real advantages are the same kind of advantages that you would be getting in a normal 2-game slate. You can play a big dog. You can play a heavier stack on a game that maybe people are not going to be as likely to heavy stack. And then there's, I don't like the idea of one-offing or something in a slate like this. That's always an option, but I'm not a huge fan of the idea of one-offing. You could maybe try one-offing like Suning Team. Something like that might work out all right. You could try game stacking. If I was going to game stacks, I think Suning and JDG is the game stack, the match to game stack. I don't think Damwon and DragonX makes a great target for that. Then again, that just means lower ownership on Damwon DragonX game stacks. So it's the same thing as most 2-game slates, to be honest with you guys. And I just don't think it's highly exciting, which kind of sucks. I was really hoping we were going to get a 4-gamer here, and I think the advantage in not playing Damwon Gaming or DragonX in the 4-game slate would have been fantastic. Unfortunately, they didn't give that to us, so we've got what we've got. Hopefully this was still kind of useful for people in figuring out what they want to do tonight. I just don't think there's a ton of options the way that the salary plays out here. So that's all for me, guys. I'll talk to you later. Good luck, and let's get some money tonight. Hopefully the next slate prices out a little bit better. Talk to you later.